I think this is the core philosophical question that Mary Shelley is asking. Are there laws that govern human nature in the same way that there are laws that govern the natural world? Hello, and welcome to WINNOW. Normally, the subtitle of this podcast is A Couple's Close Reading of the Iliad and the Odyssey, but today we are pausing from our Homer journeys to talk about Frankenstein.
Yes, today is a very special bonus episode. Today is the day that the Guillermo del Toro version of Frankenstein is releasing on Netflix.
Which is frustrating because it should have released much more widely in theaters for a very long time, rather than the really dumb limited release that they gave it.
So we got to watch it on our TV at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Friday, which is like a really weird experience, but I'll take whatever I can get.
Yeah, because Frankenstein is the greatest book, and I'm not hyperbolizing. When you read books a lot of people ask you what your favorite book is, and that is always kind of shifting, but I think really Frankenstein now is my answer to that question.
And we should just pause. If you're new here and this is your first episode of WINNOW ever, my name is Isabella Gemmer.
I'm Owen Gemmer.
We are married. We love to talk about books together. And Owen, we haven't talked about it too much on the pod yet, but Owen is a high school English teacher. So Frankenstein has a very special place in his heart, but also his curriculum.
Yes. So I've taught for 5 years, and Frankenstein is the only novel that I have taught all 5 years at different schools I've been at. Mm-hmm. It's the only kind of steady thing in my curriculum. I've always done it with sophomores, and it has always gone super well. And every time I've interviewed for teaching jobs, a question you often get is like, what's your favorite book to teach? And Frankenstein has always been my go-to answer for that. Because the kind of, I'm going to go into interview mode. I think one of the fascinating things about Frankenstein is basically everybody comes in with preconceived notions from pop culture, right? They know the green monster with the bolt sticking out of his neck, and they have, Frankenweenie in their head or whatever. And the book so quickly shatters all of those expectations. Mm-hmm. And so it's just really fun to see students realize how much more complex the original story is than the kind of really dumbed down and oversimplified and very changed version most of us get in pop culture.
Yeah.
But even beyond that, I think the book itself does such a good job. Well, the language is brilliant. It's just brilliantly written. Mm-hmm. And it's so relevant to many modern conversations about the limits of scientific advancement. Mm-hmm. So I'm always able in the classroom to tie in conversations about genetic engineering or cloning or AI and sort of creating humanoid robots and these sorts of things, because there are so many places where in the modern world we see scientists maybe going a little bit too far, playing God. And I think this is kind of the original mad scientist gone wrong story that I think is really important for students to be aware of.
It is crazy how much a book written in the early 1800s. I think some people might think this is in early 1900s.
Yeah.
This book was written in the early 1800s.
Yeah.
By an 18-year-old girl.
Yeah.
Woman. And the way that it still speaks so directly to those of us who are alive today is absolutely shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty unparalleled, I think, in terms of direct relevance to modern conversations about technology and science in ways that I think it's so easy for anybody who reads it and talks about it to see parallels and be able to use the book as a mirror for bigger questions in our own lives, which I think is the point of any English class and any reading of any literature.
It does address questions of science, and in many ways you can see it as a response to the Enlightenment, I think. But it also deals with very human things as well. So it balances that really that. Yeah,
there's a lot of religious themes and things like that because the quest for knowledge. There's also a lot, right? Direct references to Paradise Lost and to Genesis, and then this the original sort of forbidden knowledge story of Adam and Eve also really plays into this.
Yeah, it's incredibly grounded in real things, which for something that is about something extraordinary and it is crazy cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and because you have read this now for the first time in full, just in
Yes.
the last couple of days, you had
Yes.
read portions of it. And obviously we've talked about it and you've seen
Yes.
movie versions, but this was your first time like reading it cover to cover. How was
Yes.
that?
I think the thing that struck me the most on this read through was like the emphasis on language, and we'll get into it more in a second, but the theme of language and what language can do and how language informs who we are and how we behave was something that I hadn't seen before because I hadn't read the full thing before, and particularly in how people who haven't read it might not know that the creature is incredibly eloquent.
Yes. That's another thing that always shocks students when he first speaks. And it's like, whoa, he's not just grunting.
I would even say, like, when he speaks, he sounds better educated than Victor.
Yeah.
Who the main character, who is supposed to be highly educated. Like, that I think is like what really struck me. And obviously the whole book itself is written with such eloquent language as well. And the pacing is also immaculate. The chapters are written so like they're a perfect length where you're like, I got it. And they're just the right length where you're like, I can read the next one right now. Mm-hmm. And so the book pulls you along at a really good pace. And this is a book that you can, like on a Saturday, if you whip out an audiobook.
Or the physical book. It's not that big.
Yeah, definitely something that you can read in a day, which is a nice little segue to mention that
yes.
Owen has an audiobook YouTube channel where he posts various audiobooks. And
yeah. So I just recorded an audiobook of this. I have the text on the screen because most audiobooks are just listening, but a lot of people I know really like the visuals as they listen. And then I also include at the end of each chapter 3 or 4 discussion questions for your own kind of pondering and reflection to give you a little bit more guidance on what to think about and how to think about the next chapters. And yeah, to build on Bella's point about the language, it was amazing to read out loud. Like when I'm teaching it, like I read passages aloud in class, but like reading the entire thing aloud, Mary Shelley is just a genius with the English language. And there is so much like passion and like verve in her language. It's hard to describe without actually just like either listening to it or reading it out loud.
Yeah.
So we'll have that linked if you want to read it or listen to it. I've been told by many people, including Bella, that my voice sounds very good still, even when sped up. So you can listen to it on 1.5, 2 times speed without losing that much.
I only listen to audiobooks at least double the speed. And yeah, your voice definitely holds up.
Do you want to also, in speaking about the language, give a little bit of backstory as to how Mary Shelley wrote this? Because this is both just interesting as like fun facts, but it also, I think, directly ties to an interpretation of the whole novel that both of us have.
I think we kind of generally know that Frankenstein was written as a result of, Mary Shelley, Percy Shelley, and Lord Byron challenging each other to write ghost stories. And thus Frankenstein was born. But there is like a lot more to it that I think is incredibly interesting. Basically, it was the summer of 1816. And so Mary Shelley, Percy Shelley, they later were married, but at the time they were not. Mary Shelley was only 18 years old, and she had an infant child with her. They were with Lord Byron, who was on the run from many debts. And just like, it feels like the debts scandal, like the guy was running from stuff all the time, it seems. They were accompanied by Lord Byron's doctor, Dr. Polidori, I believe is how you pronounce his name. So his doctor was just with him. His job was to like keep a journal of the journey. And they were also with Mary Shelley's stepsister, Claire Clairmont. And Claire Clairmont was pregnant with Lord Byron's child at the time.
Whoa, I didn't know that part.
And and Lord Byron wanted nothing to do with her but she was obviously on this trip with them. So like, I can't even begin to imagine like the tension between all these people,
especially because it turns into like a bottle episode on a sitcom, right? Because they were all trapped together.
They were all traveling together. They were staying in some house at Lake Geneva. Also crazy circumstances. So there had recently been a volcano in Indonesia. Mount Tambora had recently erupted, and it was summertime. But the eruption of this volcano, like the ashes that spread across Europe, like cast Europe into like a cold winter. It's been called like the year without a summer, which is also just like crazy vibes. Like imagine like you're like gonna go chill at the lake with your buds, but you're
the summertime vacation.
In the summer, it's like vacation, but you're also like Lord Byron on like running from the law and your responsibilities. And it's actually not summer. It actually turns out that it's the most miserable summer. It's cold, rainy, there's thunder and lightning. Like, that's just a crazy circumstance. Not even to mention that, like, this volcanic eruption had massive effects on agriculture. And so with lower food production, et cetera, like, this then led to, like, literally, like, about a million people perished as a result of this
famine and stuff.
Yeah.
So let's just pause here. This already builds into one of the major themes that we'll talk about, that power of nature, that like the natural beauty and destruction that the natural world holds, both at the same time, is a huge part of Frankenstein. And so that obviously makes a ton of sense, that like the world was literally like super drastically changed by like one just like natural disaster.
Yeah. It's like, it's a natural disaster, but it's also like it's in some ways like a perversion of nature, in the sense that like it's supposed to be summer,
right?
But it is in fact winter, and like
everything is on its head.
The natural world itself and the laws of nature, things that we like. Summer is supposed to be summer, winter is supposed to be winter. These cycles are supposed to stay, cyclical. But there's this huge like disruption to that, to those expectations that we have of nature, which I think is, I think you can definitely like, you feel that in a sense in the way that it's written and the themes that come out. I think that the knowledge of the circumstances that Frankenstein was born out of is also incredibly interesting because, right, this is a book written by a woman mostly about men and the problems that men face.
And cause.
That they are the cause of their own suffering sometimes. She was essentially, on this vacation with these guys, watching Lord Byron just literally running from his debts, and not wanting to acknowledge that he had a child with this woman that was also on the trip. And he wanted nothing to do with this woman and this child. In some ways you could see Frankenstein as, and none of this, I don't know if, none of this has ever been explicitly, found in some diary. But I think it's kind of safe to say that we can extrapolate that Mary Shelley was kind of holding a mirror up to the actions of these men around her. And she was kind of like, look, like, this is you not being a responsible man.
Yeah, because I think it's really important that Mary Shelley is the daughter of one of the sort of early pioneers of European feminism, Mary Wollstonecraft, who then wrote The Vindication of the Rights of Woman. So she was super aware of that. Her father was a politician. And so she was, as a woman, was never like formally educated, but her parents were just like, read everything you want. And so that I think also plays into our kind of overall thoughts about language in this, that like Mary Shelley also was educated in what nowadays we would see as very non-traditional. But for many people was just like, just read as many books as you can, and become a master of language and of human nature and the power of literature to just like teach us everything we need to know. So let's get into it. We've been doing all this introductory stuff, which is good, but we're going to try right now and do a little bit of a speed run through a plot summary if you have not yet read Frankenstein. Though, again, it is fairly short. You can read it with the physical book or an audiobook in, probably 6-7 hours, either in one day or spread out over a couple days.
Yeah.
And we'll read a few of our favorite quotes as we go. And yeah, so the book opens as a frame story. So a frame story is the kind of literary term for a story within a story. So like the Titanic of like, this is how I got here. Like we start with one and then we get like flashbacks. So first character we meet is Robert Walton. We've been calling him Mr. Goggins because he often is referred to as Walton. So Walton Goggins is an Arctic explorer who is writing letters to his sister about his journey to find the North Pole. So he's a scientist. He wants both to be sort of well known as like the first person to reach the North Pole, and then also he wants to do experiments with magnetism at the North Pole. And so he's motivated both by the kind of like scientific quest and just the sort of like glory of being the first person to do something. While they're trapped in the ice, Victor Frankenstein washes up basically on their boat, and he's like basically almost dead. They revive him, and he's like, I got a story to tell you. And so then the rest of the book is Victor giving his narration of like how we got here. How did I end up in the Arctic chasing the creature?
Yeah. I think almost the entirety of this story is like told secondhand. So the book starts and ends with Walton's letters to his sister, through which he's explaining how Frankenstein came to be with him, and then, of course, the ending. And then the middle section is Walton's record of Frankenstein, Victor Frankenstein, recalling all the events of his life. And then when the creature eventually gets his moment to explain, what his life has been all about, that is also told secondhand through Frankenstein to Walton in this record.
And then it gets even more complicated because then within the creature's backstory, he learns the backstory of the family he's been watching. And so their backstory is technically fourth hand from that family to the creature, to Victor, to Walton.
Yes.
So there's lots of layers.
Yes, lots of layers.
Yes.
And yes, something about me is that I love a frame story.
Yes. Yeah. The stories within the stories are very good. So we get to Victor's story. We get his early childhood, super wealthy parents who treated him like a god. That's important. And then he was super curious, loved reading and exploring and things like this. He eventually stumbles upon a book by some alchemists, and his dad's like, don't read that. That's trash. And Victor's like, well, that makes me want to read it more. So he gets really into alchemy and Paracelsus and Albertus Magnus and this quest for the Philosopher's Stone. Then his mom dies. Very tragic, very sad. But he's on his way to college. And so he gets to college and he's like, my mom died and I'm really interested in the elixir of life. What do these two mean? I'm really going to be interested in bringing people back to life. So that's kind of his general quest. He does research, science-y mumbo jumbo. And I think it's actually important that it's mumbo jumbo. Like Mary Shelley doesn't really explain any of it.
Yes. Yeah. Very important to note that the Hollywoodized version of Frankenstein involves like all the lightning stuff, like the discovery that that the nervous system runs on electrical impulses, and if I just harness enough lightning from the sky, then I could like reanimate a corpse. Like that is not at all a part of the book, and I think that does serve to like create even more sense of Gothic mystery, but it also emphasizes like. Victor does not want to tell Walton what he discovered as the building blocks of creating life, because like he does not want this cycle in any way to perpetuate itself. So all that stuff is left out.
Yeah, and all the movies, there's no "it's alive" moment. Like that's the very iconic line, and like students are always shocked. Like what the actual creation of the creature is literally like 3 paragraphs, and then all of a sudden it's just like and then I made it, and then it woke up, and then it just goes from there. And this is in like chapter 5. It's like 24 chapters in the book, and like the creature's made in chapter 5, and then we're just going from there. So we get to that moment, and I'm going to be actually very clear here. I tell my students. And I'm very good at it. We refer to him as the creature at first. If we want to refer to him as the monster later, we can. But at the beginning, we want to be neutral and refer to him as the creature. Yeah, so Victor creates the creature, and his reaction is quite extreme.
Yeah, so I'm going to read the paragraph that describes what the creature looks like when he, first wakes up. Because, again, very different from what we think of in the movies. Not green, specifically. How can I describe my emotions at this catastrophe? Or how delineate the wretch whom with such infinite pains and care I had endeavored to form? His limbs were in proportion, and I had selected his features as beautiful. Beautiful, great God! His yellow skin scarcely covered the work of muscles and arteries beneath. His hair was of a lustrous black and flowing, his teeth of pearly whiteness. But these luxuriances only formed a more horrid contrast with his watery eyes that seemed almost of the same color as the dun white socks in which they were set, his shriveled complexion and straight black lips.
So there's a lot going on there. Yes. One thing I'll say when we talk about the movie, the actual physical description of the creature, I don't actually care about. Like, he doesn't have black hair or anything. That's not important to me. I think the ugliness is important, but how directors achieve ugliness, I really never worry about the appearance of characters for the most part in book to movie adaptations.
It is interesting because I find it like almost the most interesting part, not the most interesting part of Frankenstein, but like how the character looks and in what way ugliness is portrayed is incredibly interesting to me. In the book, Frankenstein makes the creature to be large, and it's so strange because his limbs were in proportion, and I had selected his features as beautiful. Just to get into like maybe some like ancient Greek philosophy on what is beauty, I think that it's safe to say that like if something is in proportion, at least from like an ancient Greek standard, in proportion equals beauty in a lot of ways.
And I think there are modern scientific studies that like we naturally like would rate faces as more beautiful when they're more symmetrical and things like that. Like it's
symmetrical, a symmetrical face would be like, I think, in proportion,
right?
And therefore more beautiful. So like, and I selected his individual features as beautiful. So like, when looking at each of the parts on their own are beautiful and they're in proportion with one another, and yet he is ugly.
Yes.
Like, I think that is incredibly interesting.
Yeah. So I think this also sets up a huge theme throughout the rest of the novel is contrast. The contrast between sort of good and bad, beautiful and ugly, and how many things contain both at the same time in what might seem to be paradoxical ways. Like it's very clear this description is paradoxical. Like he is at the same time beautiful and ugly. And that contrast is really important for the rest of the novel in so many different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we move on. Creature is alive. Victor is disgusted. Victor faints. Creature runs away. And Victor wakes up. His friend Henry has come and he's like being revived. And it's like, oh, it's springtime. Yay, I'm happy again. It takes like a long time though. But Victor's like basically just trying to ignore the creature as much as possible and just move on.
Yeah.
Then they get news. This is again like 2 years later. We're really condensing the timeline that Victor's younger brother, William, has been murdered. So they both return home. Tragedy, young child is dead. On the way home, Victor sees the creature like off in the distance and is like, I know that he did it. There's no evidence, but he's like, oh, it must have been him.
Yeah.
They go home and it turns out that William was murdered while like playing hide and seek in the woods. And eventually Justine, who is like basically like the nanny of the family, is accused because there's circumstantial evidence. There was like a locket that William had planted on her. And so she is accused. Victor firmly believes that Justine is innocent, that the creature has done this. And so he like witnesses Justine's trial, but decides not to say anything because he believes that everybody will just think he's insane if he's like, oh, actually it was this giant 8-foot tall creature that I made that did this. Yeah. So he stays silent. Justine is accused and put to death. Victor
does the absolute least.
Yes.
In all circumstances.
Right. Yeah. And one quote that I want to read that is really important to me in my interpretation of the book, but that most movie versions kind of leave out basically all of this with Justine because she's a fairly minor character. She's really only present in these like 2 chapters. But I think these 2 chapters are really important for, again, developing themes in the book. So, Justine goes through the whole trial. Victor doesn't say anything in her defense. She is accused basically just on circumstantial evidence, but there's a lot of circumstantial evidence. But then Victor and Elizabeth get news that she has confessed to the murder, and they're like, wait, what happened? So they go to the prison basically right before she's executed, and they talk to her.
Yeah.
And she explains why she ended up confessing to the murder. I did confess, but I confessed a lie. I confessed that I might obtain absolution. But now that falsehood lies heavier at my heart than all my other sins. The God of heaven forgive me. Ever since I was condemned, my confessor has besieged me. He threatened and menaced until I almost began to think that I was the monster that he said I was. He threatened excommunication and hellfire in the last moments if I continued obdurate.
Yeah.
She basically admits that I know that I'm innocent, and yet I confessed it because I was like, everybody believed me to be guilty. And so I basically became convinced that I myself was actually guilty.
Yes. Become kind of a classic, almost trope nowadays that if enough people call you the monster, do you become the monster? Like, yeah. And this is where it started.
Yes. Right. So Justine dies. Victor blames himself for her death and for William's death. He goes into another fit of depression and is really sad. But then he goes wandering in the mountains to cure himself because he loves like hiking, basically. And on one of his hikes up to Mont Blanc in Chamonix, while he's like wandering in the snow, the creature comes out of like this ice cave and basically confronts him and speaks. And so the creature speaks incredibly eloquently. Again, at this point, it's been like 2 or 3 years since the creature was initially created.
Yeah, I think at this point, like I think 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the creature is basically like holds Victor. Victor tries to kill him, but the creature's super strong and is like, whatever, like you fool.
Yeah, whenever Victor tries to like physically attack the creature, it's basically just like, he evaded me.
Right.
Like, I don't know what that means, but like he's got like ninja dodging skills,
Yeah.
I think. You just like, you can't catch me. Like, which is crazy.
And so the creature is basically just like, hey, I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to hurt you. I just want you to listen to me. I want you to hear my story and have compassion on me.
Yeah.
And so the creature then takes him. Victor finally, after much resistance, agrees.
Yeah.
And so then they sit down together, and the creature then tells his backstory, starting from day one of his birth.
Yes.
With this now story within the story within the story, we learn that the creature on his first day of life was like just trying to figure out like how to see and like how to drink water and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Eventually, as he's stumbling around, he like discovers fire and then like figures out how to cook stuff and all of that. Then he finds this like shepherd's hut where the shepherd is, who has food, and he like walks in, and then the shepherd is like terrified and runs away. And then he's like, oh, that was weird, but there's food, so I'm going to eat the food. Then he goes into a village. He sees more people. It's like, oh, there's probably more food. So I go into this village, and then everybody in the village is terrified. Some like start throwing rocks at him and stuff and chase him away. And he's like, well, this is weird. Why does nobody like me? So eventually he finds this like cottage in the woods and is like, I shouldn't approach these people. They seem scared of me for some reason that I don't understand. So he like finds basically like their pigsty, and there's like a hole in the wall. And so he like lives in their pigsty and then like just watches the family.
Yeah.
And this, for me personally, I think is the most interesting part of the whole book. What happens as he watches the family.
Yeah.
So I don't need to go into all the details, but basically the general vibe is there's an old man who is blind and his son and his daughter, 3 people living together. They all love each other very much. They are all super supportive of one another, but they are also very poor. And the creature, having been accustomed to just like stealing food from the family, realizes that they're poor and like are kind of starving. And so he actually stops stealing from them and starts helping them with some of their chores, like in the middle of the night chopping firewood. And it's just like, these people are so beautiful. Like they play music, they talk to one another. And he's like, this is incredible. Like they seem to have such compassion and love for one another. But he feels outcast from that. He recognizes that like he finally sees his reflection and realizes like I'm ugly in comparison to these people. I am a monster. They are sort of angels. And he like just basically watches them for almost like another year.
Yeah.
He tries to learn language by listening to them. Eventually, another woman arrives whose name is Safi. Turns out she's like Felix's fiance, and we get the backstory of that, and that's the story within story within story. But because Safi is not from around there, they have to sort of teach her how to speak French. This is all happening in French in the context of this, which I think is hilarious to actually picture the creature speaking French the whole time.
Yeah.
It's obviously written in English, but in fiction they're speaking French.
Wouldn't that be amazing if someone did a French version of Frankenstein and they all spoke French the whole time? Oh, that would be awesome. Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, he basically learns how to read and write and speak by just basically like watching this family. And he eventually becomes like so desirous of being a part of their family, of sharing in that love with them, because he sees what they have as so like divine and beautiful. But he knows he can't sort of go in. But his plan is that this old man is blind, and so the old man won't be prejudiced towards my ugliness. So when all of the others are out, he like goes into the old man and is like, I'm here to sort of like talk to my friends who hate me. He's like trying basically to supplicate himself to this old man. Mm-hmm. The old man is being very responsive and very kind to a stranger he's willing to help.
Yeah.
But then the children come, well, they're adults, but like the others come back. They see him like basically at the knees of their dad, and he's like this big ugly monster. Yeah. And so they're like, he's trying to kill our dad. And so they basically like beat him and chase him away. Mm-hmm. And so from this moment, the creature is essentially like all humanity, like even the kindest humans hate me.
Yeah.
And so how can I not hate human beings? And so he kind of flips into rage mode a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then is just like, I need to get revenge on Victor. Again, he has learned to read, and he found some like notes from Victor's journals, like in the pockets of the shirt that he stole or something.
Yeah.
So he like knows who Victor is. He knows that he was like fabricated in this way, and is like, this guy is now enemy number one.
He knows that Victor is in Geneva, and he has no way of knowing how to get there, or he can't talk to anyone, ask anyone for directions, but he is going to get there.
Yeah. But I think along the way, another really important part, again, for me, that I find is instrumental in his understanding of who he is as a person / as a monster, is when he's watching the family and he sees himself in the reflection of a pond.
Yeah.
And there is a direct allusion here to Paradise Lost, because it's also important. He eventually finds a copy of Paradise Lost and reads it. And so there are lots of ways in which the creature analogizes his experience to that of Adam, Eve, and Satan.
Yes.
So this is one of those moments. I had admired the perfect forms of my cottagers, their grace, beauty, and delicate complexions, but how I was terrified when I viewed myself in a transparent pool. At first, I started back, unable to believe that it was indeed I who was reflected in the mirror. And when I became fully convinced that I was in reality the monster that I am, I was filled with the bitterest sensations of despondence and mortification. Alas, I did not yet entirely know the fatal effects of this miserable deformity. So again, in Paradise Lost, there's a scene where Eve sees her reflection, and she's admiring her own beauty, made in the image of God. Yeah. And so this is contrasted with the creature now looking at his reflection in a pool, realizing how ugly he is, especially, again, in contrast to the beauty of the other people that he sees. Yeah. So here's this other contrast, right? Like, they have this, I am apart from that. And so therefore I am separated from the beauty of humanity. Mm-hmm. And so because he feels then ultimately so separated from them when they reject him, he's like, well, if they see me as ugly, I must be. And so he kind of then embraces that, like, I am a monster, and the only power that I have is the power to make people afraid. Right. He goes on this quest back to Geneva somehow, traveling around, and eventually that's what leads him. He stumbles upon William. William mentions that he's
super sassy. He's like, you're ugly. I'm going to go tell my dad about this.
Yeah. And then he's like, my dad, Mr. Frankenstein. And then the creature's like, you are a Frankenstein? And then just chokes him out.
I got something for you.
Yeah. And then the creature plants evidence on Justine, and basically like realizes he has this moment of like exultation. Like, when I killed William, he has this moment of like, I exulted because I realized like I do have power in this world. Like, I can like make people feel things. They are negative things, but like, this is real power that I have, where so far he's been so powerless. And this is kind of his like full now quest into revenge. But he actually pauses here in the story, and then we return back to the conversation between Victor and the creature, and the creature basically tells Victor, these are the ways I feel, this is what I have done, but I am willing to stop completely if you make me another creature female.
A female
We will
companion.
run away together. We'll live in South America
Yeah.
because no human being will ever associate with me. So the only person who will be somebody as ugly as I am.
Yeah.
And he's like, I will just quit. I will just leave. We'll go live in the woods for the rest of our lives, just the two of us, and just do that. And I will leave you alone. If you don't do that, well, then I'll like make you miserable. And so he basically gives them this ultimatum.
But he eventually says, he's basically like, okay, whatever. But he's like, he's like, I know nothing about female anatomy. I have to go to.
Yeah, kind of.
It's basically what happens. It doesn't like not like explicit, like, but he's basically like, oh, I don't know how to make a female human being, so I have to go all the way to England to study under someone else.
Yeah.
And learn enough about female anatomy so that I can even attempt to do this.
Yeah, it's the female anatomy part is not directly stated in the novel, but it's kind of like, what else is there to learn? Like he knows how to do it. Like, what
Yeah.
He's like, I have to go learn something else.
You're
but
like,
you've already done it
I wonder
once.
what that something else is.
Yeah.
What is different here? Oh, you don't know anything about female anatomy.
Yeah.
Men still know nothing, especially doctors still know nothing about female anatomy, but that's a separate issue.
Yes. So eventually, again, he's procrastinating. His friend Henry goes with him to England, and they're like wandering around, looking at all the castles and stuff, procrastinating. But eventually, Victor's like, all right, I got to do this. He like finds an island like way out off the northwest coast of the United Kingdom, or what is now the United Kingdom.
Scotland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he basically like has a Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone hut out in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah.
Hagrid doesn't come knocking down the door, but the creature ultimately comes knocking down the door when he's making the female creature.
Yeah. He's like, where is she?
Yeah. And Victor is finally switches back and he's like, no, I can't do this. I can't do this. What if she is just as evil as he is and they go kill all of humanity? Then I'll be like the person who brought about the end of the world. And so he tears the female creature apart that he was like in progress of making. The creature sees this and is like, well, now there's no hope for you. He threatens directly, I will be with you on your wedding night, and then leaves. Victor's like, I don't know what to do, but I guess I got to go home and be with Elizabeth.
You actually haven't mentioned Elizabeth yet.
Yeah, I know. This is interesting.
Back when Victor was a young child, and his parents were both alive, this is at the beginning of the story, Elizabeth was a girl who his parents found living in poverty.
In an orphanage,
but she was so beautiful, essentially, and so pure to their eyes that they decided that to adopt her. They decided that you don't need to live in poverty. You're too beautiful for that. You can come live with us. And so it's kind of understood from like the moment that she is adopted and integrated into the Frankenstein family, that she is sort of betrothed to Victor. Victor grows up with this female companion his whole life who is beautiful and who adores him.
I haven't mentioned her because we're getting this from Victor's perspective. Victor treats her like such kind of a side character that he hardly, the only times really for the first like 2/3 of the book that she's relevant is when she is writing letters to Victor.
Yes.
Victor basically never seeks out her thoughts or anything like that. She sometimes writes letters. It's like, hey, like this is what's going on. This is how I feel.
Yes.
But it's always on the side for Victor. And because we get this from Victor's perspective, I think we naturally end up feeling like she's on the side, which is, I think, kind of the point. We'll get into that.
It's kind of the point. So Elizabeth is a female character that is, you could almost say in like a classic like sense, is put on a pedestal and is she is supposed to be, she's this like beautiful, perfect representation of womanhood. But that is precisely the point because we only see her from Victor's perspective. And so therefore she is one-dimensional for a reason. Yeah. Because Victor sees her as one-dimensional.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So Victor's like, I got to go back and be with Elizabeth, finally get married. But on his way back, when he gets back to the mainland, turns out Henry has been murdered. And Victor sees Henry's dead body and is like, I've killed him, because he knows that the creature did it. But then he's like, everybody else sees him, was like, you just admitted to the murder. We're going to arrest you. So Victor's like in prison for a while. Eventually he gets freed. His dad comes and kind of gets him out of prison. They return home, but Henry's dead. So Victor is really depressed again, but he's with Elizabeth. Now he's preparing for the wedding. But again, as another sign of his arrogance, he believes that when the creature says, I will be with you on your wedding night, that means the creature is going to come attack him and try and kill him. And so he's just basically like, this is about me. This is our final showdown. Like, either I will kill him and then I can live happily forever after with Elizabeth, or I will die and then who cares? So it's all about him.
Yeah.
There's like, it's very clear in the narration that Victor tells Elizabeth after their wedding to just like go hang out in the bedroom. I need to go do something, look for the creature. And he like leaves Elizabeth alone.
Yeah.
Which is a sign of his just total ignorance of like what's happening.
Yeah.
Turns out the creature is planning on killing Elizabeth the whole time. Creature goes, kills Elizabeth, and then gets away. And so this leads us into the finale. Basically, everybody that Victor loves is dead, and the creature is successful.
Yeah. Everyone that Victor knows and loves dies, because Victor's father dies of heartbreak when he hears that Elizabeth has died, and then the creature takes off, and Victor is like suddenly he's finally fueled with enough rage to actually do something about this whole situation.
He's like, I've got nothing left to lose. I may as well.
Now that he has nothing, he could have done something earlier, but now that he has nothing left to lose, of course, now he does something about it. In his mind, he's hunting down the creature, but the creature is, I think, aware that if he just keeps moving, he can lure Victor farther and farther away from society. And so Victor chases the creature all the way out to where Walton is, North Pole?
Yeah.
It's North Pole?
Yep.
Yeah. Just in the middle of nowhere, bare and cold. No one goes here except for people who are crazy like Walton. Mm-hmm. And that's that.
Then we resume with Walton's narration.
Yeah.
Victor is aboard the ship.
It gets so cold. People on the crew start dying. The crew is like, we're going to mutiny unless when the ship gets free of the ice, like, we got to go back.
Yeah, we can't continue to the North Pole.
Yeah.
And Victor has this moment of like, you cowards, like, ambition is the best thing ever. Seemingly clearly not having learned his lesson.
Yeah, Victor has not learned any lessons. This is Walton's story in a sense that like bookends this, because Walton has learned a lesson.
Yeah.
He has learned that, maybe I should, when the ship is free of the ice, maybe I should turn around and maybe I should just spend some time with my sister, who I'm writing all these letters to, who I love so dearly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. But Victor eventually succumbs to his illness from, starvation and cold and just
he
all
always
of the
has a fever
hardships.
too.
Yeah.
Like he has fevers for months at a time.
Yeah. And so he eventually dies very pathetically. Doesn't get to fight the creature, doesn't get to go down in a blaze of glory. He just kind of dies.
Yeah.
And Walton's like, oh, that's interesting. But then turns out the creature was watching the whole time. The creature comes in to mourn and is basically like crying over Victor's body. And Walton goes in and is like, hey, I know who you are. What's going on here? Mm-hmm. And then the creature has a just brilliant, like 3 or 4 page, like long speech about how his quest for revenge was totally unsatisfactory. That like right now he has sort of gotten what he wanted, where Victor is dead, and it was miserable, and yet none of that filled the holes in his life. And so the creature himself is also completely unsatisfied by his revenge.
Yeah. It's so well written, so eloquently spoken. The last few pages of this, as I was finishing reading this last night, I was like, okay, let's get to the end. I was like, because I kind of know how it ends in a sense, but as the creature starts speaking at the end, I just remember I got very still and I was like arrested in a sense.
Right, because it's a reminder that like this is not like an action book. I think it's really important that none of the murders, none of the deaths or the direct murders happen sort of like quote unquote on screen. They all happen somewhere else and then people find out about it later. We never actually see the creature kill anybody. This is not an action story. Like there's actually very, very, very little fighting, wrestling, shooting at each other kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think the end is super slow and it's like, oh yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just going to read a paragraph here at the end from the creature's speech. He's talking to Walton. You who call Frankenstein your friend seem to have a knowledge of my crimes and his misfortunes. But in the detail which he gave you of them, he could not sum up the hours and months of misery which I endured, wasting in impotent passions. For while I destroyed his hopes, I did not satisfy my own desires. They were forever ardent and craving. Still I desired love and friendship, and I was still spurned. Was there no injustice in this? Am I to be thought the only criminal when all humankind sinned against me? Why do you not hate Felix, who drove his friend from the door with contumely? Why do you not execrate the rustic, who sought to destroy the Savior of his child? Nay, these are virtuous and immaculate beings. I, the miserable and the abandoned, am an abortion to be spurned at, and kicked and trampled on. Even now my blood boils at the recollection of this injustice.
I think what I love about the ending is it is deeply tragic on so many levels. Like most tragedies, like typically, like main character protagonist starts high and then like has this fall from grace. Mm-hmm. But this, you can read Victor as a tragic arc as well. He starts off with knowledge, wealth, and everything, and then just becomes more and more depraved. But so does the creature. Like everybody gets a tragic ending. Like nobody is satisfied at the end. You're not supposed to feel good about the ending for any of the characters, I don't think.
Yeah. Like in Shakespearean tragedy sense, like everybody dies, except for usually one guy who is left to actually like learn the moral of the story.
Right. And that does happen here, right? Like both Victor and the creature and everybody else is dead and Walton is left alive.
Yeah. You have to have like one witness who witnesses all the death in a sense.
And yet it's not as satisfying, I think, as like a Shakespearean tragedy. It leaves you feeling more sort of off kilter.
You think so?
I think so.
Interesting.
Because I think, at least for me, and this is getting now more into interpretive lenses, but on the one hand, you come to sort of despise Victor the whole time, and you come especially at the beginning of the creature story to sympathize with him. So on the one hand, when Victor dies, your gut reaction feels like it should be, he got what he deserved. And yet it doesn't actually ever feel that way because the creature who finally got what he wanted, Victor's absolute misery, also isn't satisfied and doesn't get what he wants.
It's true.
And so the person that you sympathize the most with also doesn't get the kind of the positive ending that comes from the other character's negative ending. And so you're kind of left with like, oh gosh, like this just, everybody was in the wrong.
Yeah. I think that also is a result of realizing that Victor never learned any lessons. Because even at the end, he thinks that pushing on through the ice to the, to undiscovered country is still the important thing. Right. And so you're like, okay, he didn't learn a lesson. And the creature isn't happy with anything either. Though it is fitting that it does seem like they will both die. Or Victor has died, and it seems like the creature will die.
Yes, because we should be clear. The creature's like, I'm going to go burn myself on a funeral pyre and just like float off into the distance because there's nothing left for me either.
Yeah.
And the book ends with the creature kind of like floating off on this like ice piece with a bunch of wood, presumably to light himself on fire.
Yeah. And so at least it has an ending.
Yeah, no, right. I think like narratively, it's a fantastic like arc with very clear endings, but like emotionally, that's what I think is so interesting about it is it doesn't like, it leaves me feeling like off kilter about things.
Interesting.
And so I think this will transition pretty well into, we want to talk a little bit about some of what we understand as main themes of the book, because ultimately when we're watching the movie, we know any movie adaptation of a book will need to sacrifice some plot, character things. That's just natural. So we expect that, but we want to be really clear about what themes we think are the most important in the book for the movie to capture, even if it doesn't capture all of the kind of plot things.
Yeah, and even if it doesn't capture even all of the themes that we think are the most important, like it's gotta have good themes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So one, I think, really obvious theme of the whole book that a lot of people talk about is like what makes a monster. And I think, people who have read the book there are lots of memes about like, well, actually, like, right, because people who haven't read the book, just the normal pop culture plebeians, think that like Frankenstein refers to the monster. And then it's like, actually, no, that's Frankenstein's monster. Frankenstein was the doctor. And then, like that's the sort of level one like, aha, I know the difference of whose character is who. And then when people have read the book, they're like, actually, Victor was the monster the whole time because he was cruel and didn't take care of the creature. And obviously this is true, right? Like, it is true that Victor is not a good person and that we are meant to criticize him again. But to me, that's like a super easy, like obvious reading from the book. Like you get that sense within like by chapter 5, like, oh yeah, no, Victor's not a good guy. And so again, it's like, okay, yeah, that reading is there, it's present, but it's even still more complex, this what is a monster question, because again, there's a common instinct to sympathize with the creature. And I think we are meant to sympathize with the creature. And then like, oh, creature is just the victim. But then also like the creature willingly admits to multiple murders, and not just to murders in cold blood, murders that like he rejoices after. Like he is very clear that like when I killed William, I felt good about it. And so maybe he is a monster still. Maybe they're both monsters. But I think the quote that you read at the very end also then makes us question that like the creature at least believes that, well, Felix was monstrous. All these other people who chased me away just because I was ugly, like that was a pretty monstrous thing for them to do. And so there's this question of like, is human nature at its core monstrous? Like, are we all inclined to reject others and to, no matter how much we might feel like we are like inherently good, like, is there a part of us that is just inherently depraved?
Yeah. Yeah. Basically pointing the finger at society in general to say like, what if society is the problem? But obviously that's supposed to, it's directed at the reader of like, are you the problem?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's actually really important to distinguish even between society and every individual, because I think we can often say society in like this abstract way of like a sociology, like, oh, the trends of society are the evil thing, as a way of absolving ourselves of individual blame. But I think there's an important detail we didn't talk about in the summary, but when Victor initially sees William, doesn't know who he is, he just sees this child, his gut reaction is, oh, this is a young child. He hasn't spent enough time in society to be prejudiced against me. Maybe I can sort of like take him as my companion and sort of like raise him to be loving towards me because he hasn't been prejudiced by society. And yet he then basically tries to kidnap William. Again, bad. But William's instinctual reaction is still to call him ugly. And so that kind of proves that like, no, this isn't like a society thing. This is like an individual, like even a young innocent human is still like disgusted with me.
Yeah. And in that sense, it kind of has like a parable vibe, like the book.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, obviously, it's like, it has a huge moral to the story.
Right.
Many morals.
The next theme that we mentioned pretty early on was this idea of like language and education and sort of how we learn how to be human beings. And the education of the creature is so clearly defined, and yet it is so kind of like unguided, right? Like his means of education are like basically spying on this family and then learning how to read and speak by just watching. And then he finds some books and he reads like 3 books. He becomes incredibly eloquent and rational and interesting rhetorical skills and things like that. Like, yeah.
And so it's so interesting that like what are the 3 books that he reads again? Paradise Lost,
Plutarch's Lives, and The Sorrows of Werther, which I have not yet read, but I want to.
The main one that gets emphasized is Paradise Lost. And obviously the author Mary Shelley has constructed this on purpose. And obviously like he comes across Paradise Lost because it's a mirror for him to then look at his life and interpret his life and his experiences in a specific way. It speaks to like how the texts that we read, the things that we read, the stories and the mythologies that we construct around us, like it's all done through language, and it all has like a profound effect on how we view ourselves in the world around us.
Yes. Yeah, because there's another moment when he's reading Plutarch's Lives and he's reading all these stories of the great leaders of Rome and the kind of like their conquering and these kinds of things. He reflects that like if my first contact with human beings had been like with a soldier instead of with this like very peaceful, calm family, I would have been imbued with many different sort of inclinations. But because his real first contact with humanity was this like brother and sister and father who clearly love each other very much despite their poverty, like that was his first glimpse into humanity. And then the kind of like warrior stuff all came afterwards.
Yeah.
And he was like, if those had been reversed, I might be very different. And yeah.
A brother and a sister and their father living in poverty, potentially meant to mirror Frankenstein, Elizabeth, and their father living in extreme affluence. The book is full of characters paralleling one another.
Yeah. But I think it's also super, super important too that first family that he spends time with, there's no romance there. It is familial love. And I think it's actually like the whole Bride of Frankenstein idea. The creature never actually directly says he wants the female creature to be married to.
Yes.
There could be, again, it's not direct one way or another, but like it could just be I want a sister, because that's the first relationship he sees is Felix and Agatha, the sister. Well, the first relationship he wants is a father, right? Like he wants Victor to be my father. Like I want you to be the father you should be to me, but I can't have that. So now I need this female companion.
Yeah.
And I think there is a lot of room to actually think like maybe he doesn't see it as like a romantic, like I want to marry this female creature, but like I want to just have a sister, just like I saw this brother and sister.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally plausible. I think pop culture has made us always jump to this idea of the Bride of Frankenstein. But what if it's just the sister?
Yeah. For me, having read this many times and talked about this many times with students, I think the biggest kind of overarching theme that then branches into a lot of these different questions is the power of nature. And so I use the word nature very specifically, but also very abstractly, because nature can mean a lot of different things. And I think Mary Shelley intentionally means it in a lot of different ways. So on the one hand, there's the power of nature in the like natural world, right? So there's the lightning bolt that happens. There's storms. There's also like Victor being rejuvenated by the mountains. So nature is both powerful in a negative way that it like he almost dies on a boat wreck or on a boat at one point. But it's also powerful in a rejuvenative way where he's like depressed and he like goes hiking in the mountains and feels much better. So nature and like the seasons and how they change is really important, is very powerful over human beings and our kind of moods and emotions. That's there. But then I think Mary Shelley is also playing with this idea of human nature and asking the question. I think this is the core philosophical question that Mary Shelley is asking. Are there laws that govern human nature in the same way that there are laws that govern the natural world? And are there natural inclinations that we all have to good or to evil that are outside of our control and are products of our environment, just as the natural world is outside of our control? I think the answer that she has is yes, that we are all simply products of our environment, that the creature, because he was born into these circumstances and happened to find this family and happened to read these books, like became this way because of that. And he wants Victor to like overrule those things, but he can't escape those natural circumstances. And I think that's what makes us sympathize, right? Like our, as readers, reaction of sympathy with the creature is because we recognize that like if everybody is cruel to him, how could he not become cruel in response? That we recognize that like the circumstances of our upbringing, whether they be positive or negative, can shape us incredibly deeply. And I think we also see that with Victor, where his kind of like privilege and his lackadaisicality like have deeply corrupted him, where like he doesn't really care about anything. He's just like, everything's been so easy for him and he's just always been able to like be in charge of stuff that like he doesn't actually know how to take responsibility. And so I think
100%.
To the extent that we sympathize with the creature, we are also asked to sympathize with Victor a little bit. Obviously, I think we should criticize him maybe slightly more, but
we get so much about his childhood in the first few chapters because we need to be informed when we judge his behavior. We can have pity on Victor, seeing him as a product of his environment in the same way that we see that for the creature.
Well, at the same time, again, this is the complexity of the paradox that Mary Shelley asks us. At the same time, recognizing the vile acts that both of them do.
Yes.
That like we sympathize with them because of this, but also we recognize that they did awful things to other people. And that's kind of the story of human nature, right? Like, I think about this all the time, like when thinking about the criminal justice system or national international politics and things like this, that like, how do we simultaneously uphold the full complexity of other human beings while also recognizing that the actions that we take matter and have consequences?
Yeah. Because you have to simultaneously acknowledge, yes, this person acts this way because of the way they were raised, a product of their environment. But at the same time, you have to hold people accountable for their actions. So it's like that balance. I did want to bring up one more point that loosely ties into what we've been talking about with the power of nature and the laws of nature, because like one of the things that really spurs on Victor in his studies is like this, he wants to discover like these mysteries of nature, which I'm quite fascinated with. Because on the one hand, I find it so interesting that like the way in which the creature is constructed. So like, again, we are so familiar with this through pop culture that I don't think we question it enough, or we don't think about it hard enough, that this idea that Victor, he decided to take, individual pieces from bodies and sew them together or meld them together into a new being. And I find it so interesting that that's the path he chooses for creating the creature, which is ultimately this proof of concept for his ultimate goal, which is to help human beings to live forever, specifically motivated by the death of his mother. And so in the back of his mind, it's not super explicit, but in the back of his mind, there's this like, if I could figure out what makes human beings like tick, and what are the foundational building blocks of life, then no one would ever need to die, essentially. And so the creature is this stepping stone to getting to that end goal. Why choose to take in parts from people and put them together into a new being instead of like, why not just take a fully formed corpse and try whatever alchemy that he was successful with on a fully formed corpse? Like why the need to create a whole new thing is something that I think about a lot. And then like vice versa, on the other hand, I find it so fascinating that men, specifically this man, Victor Frankenstein, is like amazed, like what are the mysteries of life? How does this happen? How are things, what is the mysteries of life and death? And it's just like, there are women in your life.
We know how to make life. It's actually not that complicated.
We know how to create life. We know how children are born. And it is in fact not something that you do alone in your college dorm by yourself. It is something that happens with women. Specifically, it could be something that Victor could create life with Elizabeth, this person that he chooses to, completely ignore in pursuit of what he sees as a greater goal.
Yeah.
From a female perspective. And of course, this book is written from a female perspective. Like, it's why Victor, I think is supposed to be read as kind of a silly, fumbly college student in some ways. Like, he is trying to do something that I don't think women find very impressive. I think that the mad scientist trope has really, in Hollywood, has really convinced us that Victor is this, like, he's doing something worthy of his time and he's doing something sort of like good for humanity. When in fact, I don't think women are impressed by him.
So let's get to the movie. All of this has been excitement building up to this new movie adaptation because there have been many different, obviously, versions of Frankenstein and spin-offs and, homages and things like this. We know Guillermo del Toro is a good director. And so I will just go ahead and say, in my head, currently, the number one ranked Frankenstein adaptation movie is the Kenneth Branagh version. And I actually think it's pretty good. I don't think it's bad. And I think it actually sets a pretty high bar. So in my head, both talking about this now and when we're watching it, I am very much like going to be comparing Del Toro's Frankenstein movie to the book, obviously, and also to Kenneth Branagh's movie version, because I think Kenneth Branagh's, it's not perfect. There are things that I would change, but I think it's pretty good.
Something that I'm looking forward to seeing how they do in this adaptation is how Elizabeth is portrayed. Not because I don't need Elizabeth to be a more complex female character, because I think the point of her character is that she is one-dimensional.
And I actually think that's a common flaw, is that people are like, oh, we need to make her more complex, when actually, no, the whole point is that she's not.
Yeah.
That I think that's a flaw of the Branagh movie, of like, well, we cast Helena Bonham Carter to be Elizabeth, so like we've got to have her be more important. And I'm also very nervous. There are hints in the trailer that there will be questions of romance / lust between the creature and Elizabeth. And I think that the Kenneth Branagh movie did the same thing. And I think that that is a big mistake, because I think from the creature's perspective, his pining for the female creature is entirely abstract. His whole thing is that he has never actually experienced real love. He has only experienced love in the abstract and at a distance. And that is what sort of has debased and corrupted him, because he has never actually like had real affection, either directly for anybody or requited to him. And so if you then have the creature longing for Elizabeth directly, it, I think, really changes that and makes his longing unabstract and more concrete. And then especially, I have no idea if the movie's going to do this, but I will be incredibly upset if the movie has even any hints of like Elizabeth requiting that.
Yeah.
Because again, that fundamentally changes the creature's whole psychology, where his psychology is dependent upon never having anybody be interested in him.
Yeah. Though it's very Del Toro.
I know.
Like, if you know anything about The Shape of Water.
I know. That's what makes me really nervous.
Like, but yeah, we'll see what happens. Like, I don't know if I'll be mad about it. Like, there's something about the feminine desire for the quote unquote monstrous that I think might be.
Yeah, you're a big Twilight fan too.
Yeah. So I don't know if I'll be mad about it.
The other thing that I have as kind of a hot take about movie adaptations, especially ones that are trying to be faithful to the book, again, like Branagh's was, it seems pretty clear from the trailer that the Walton storyline will be present in this movie. And I think people do that as a way of like referencing the book. Like, yes, right, this is the book. We have Walton, who's this character that's not in any of the popular versions, but like is in the book. My hot take is that the Walton storyline is one of the easiest to cut, because obviously Walton and Victor are foils, but they are foils in the most obvious and direct ways. They are both scientists who want to be ambitious and to achieve something that nobody else has achieved before. And then it's simply this question of like, does Walton learn from Victor's mistakes? The answer is yes. Okay, cool. But like, they are almost too obvious as foils to be interesting. And I think there are so many other pairs of foils throughout that are far more interesting and more complex, because, right, like any foil is kind of, you have to have like a same but different. And I think in the Walton Victor pair, there's too much on the side of same. And there are too many more other interesting moments that should get more screen time. Again, like the family in the cottage. I think the Justine trial is really fascinating. I think many movie versions cut that out. Some of the backstory of the family who he watches in the cottage, like all those things, I think do more to develop the creature and Victor's sort of personas than the Walton stuff, which is fine, but it's super obvious. And so if I were making a Frankenstein movie and I knew I needed to cut substantial parts from the book, I would cut the Walton stuff.
Well, that's definitely not going to happen.
I know, right. So I'm curious if they keep that and also keep the other stuff, or if they end up cutting some of the other stuff that I personally find more interesting. For me, so much of what creates sympathy for the creature is the idyllic descriptions of the family in the woods and that whole sequence. And there are many times, even apart from that sequence, where Victor is wandering in the mountains, or he's spending time with Henry, that might seem random and just like, well, why are we like, they're just chilling. Like what's going on?
Yeah.
But I think Mary Shelley is trying very intentionally to develop, again, that contrast between beauty and darkness and these sorts of things. And that in order for the creature to be so depraved, he has to know how good he could have had it. He has to experience the heights of human love and wonder in order to descend into that darkness.
Yeah.
And so you need the beautiful, peaceful, idyllic moments. And the same for Victor, right? Like he is so depressed so many times, but he is brought out of it constantly by Elizabeth, by Henry, by nature and things like that. And Victor's character arc is also dependent on that contrast. And so the movie trailers obviously are trying to make it clear that this is a horror movie, kind of dark, gothic kind of stuff. And obviously that's a big part of it, but it is also about the beauty of human nature and of the natural world and things like that. And I think it's really important that a movie version do both and not just make it dark and scary.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Let's go watch a movie. I'm excited, but also nervous, but excited.
Yeah. Let's go watch this thing and come back and podcast for 2 more hours.